What happens when two old dogs, forgotten by the world, share one last embrace? In today's story, a shocking discovery at a small shelter changes everything for Rex and Molly, two heroes who defied the odds. Don't miss this incredible tale of love, loyalty, and second chances. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. The county animal shelter had closed its doors for the day, but the stillness inside was far from comforting. Dr. Sarah Harper walked through the dimly lit corridors, her steps echoing softly against the concrete floor. The faint hum of fluorescent lights filled the air, punctuated by occasional barks and whines from distant kennels. The clipboard in her hand felt heavier than usual. She glanced at it briefly, her heart sinking as she read the names of Rex and Molly, the two oldest dogs in the shelter. At the far end of the hallway, she stopped in front of their kennel. Inside, Rex, a German Shepherd mix, and Molly, a Golden Retriever mix, lay pressed close together. Their fur, once vibrant, was now dull and streaked with gray. Molly's breathing was shallow, her chest rising and falling with a labored rhythm, while Rex's stiff movements betrayed the arthritis that had plagued him for years. Despite their frailty, there was a quiet strength about them, a bond that seemed unbreakable. Sarah knelt down, peering through the metal bars. "You two," she murmured, her voice catching in her throat. "You've been through so much, haven't you?" Rex's ears perked slightly at the sound of her voice, and he lifted his head, his deep brown eyes locking onto hers. He shifted his body, wincing slightly, and moved closer to Molly, placing his front paw gently over her smaller frame. It was a gesture so deliberate, so tender that Sarah froze. Molly responded by nestling her head against Rex's chest, her eyes fluttering shut. Together they seemed to exude an unspoken understanding, as if they knew what was coming. Sarah blinked back tears. She had seen countless animals come and go during her years at the shelter, but this was different. "They're saying goodbye," she thought, the realization hitting her like a blow to the chest. For 8 long years, Rex and Molly had been overlooked by every visitor. Their age, health issues, and the stigma of being a pair had made them unadoptable. Now, the shelter was at capacity, and difficult decisions had to be made. She stood up abruptly, brushing away a tear. "Jess!" she called, her voice trembling. Jess, the shelter's young assistant, hurried down the hallway, a puzzled look on her face. "What is it?" she asked. Sarah pointed at the kennel. "Look at them. Have you ever seen anything like this?" Jess knelt beside her, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of Rex and Molly. "They're hugging," Jess said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like they know." Sarah nodded, her jaw tightening. "Get me the scanner," she said. Jess hesitated. "Dr. Harper, we've scanned them so many times before. There's nothing, no information, no owners." Sarah's gaze hardened. "Just do it, Jess, please." Jess rushed off and returned moments later with the handheld microchip scanner. She handed it to Sarah, who knelt down again and carefully pressed it to the back of Rex's neck. A faint beep sounded, and the screen displayed the usual information. Rex, stray, found near the industrial park 8 years ago. No additional details. Sarah exhaled sharply. "Nothing," she muttered. Jess handed her the scanner again for Molly. Sarah pressed it to the retriever's neck, and this time, the device emitted a loud, double beep. The screen flickered, and new information appeared. Molly, registered to the United States Army K-9 unit. Sarah froze, her heart racing. "Jess," she said, her voice shaking. "Look at this." Jess leaned over, her eyes widening as she read the screen. "The Army?" she whispered. "How is that possible?" Without waiting, Sarah scanned Rex again. The scanner beeped loudly, displaying another entry. Rex, registered to the United States Army K-9 unit. Both women stared at the screen in stunned silence. The old dogs lying before them, presumed to be abandoned strays, had a history far more extraordinary than anyone had imagined. "They're military dogs," Sarah murmured, her mind racing. "All this time, they've been here, Forgotten. Jess looked at her, wide-eyed. "What do we do?" she asked. Sarah straightened, her determination renewed. "Get me the number for the nearest military base," she said. "We need answers." While Jess hurried off to make the call, Sarah turned back to Rex and Molly. She knelt beside them, her hand trembling as she reached through the bars to stroke Rex's fur. "You're not just strays," she whispered. "You're heroes." Rex opened his eyes and looked at her, his gaze steady and unflinching. There was a wisdom in his eyes, an understanding that made Sarah's chest tighten. Molly stirred beside him, her tail wagging weakly. Despite everything, they seemed to sense that something had changed. Jess returned, holding a piece of paper with a phone number scribbled on it. "I called the base," she said. "They're going to send someone to check the records. They said it might take some time." Sarah nodded, her gaze never leaving Rex and Molly. "We'll wait," she said firmly, "no matter how long it takes." For the next few hours, Sarah stayed by their side, watching as they rested together in their kennel. The weight of the day's earlier decision still lingered, but now there was hope, a glimmer of light in an otherwise dark moment. By the time the call came back from the base, the shelter was nearly empty. Jess answered the phone, her voice hushed as she listened intently. When she hung up, she turned to Sarah, her face pale. "They confirmed it," she said. "Rex and Molly were part of a specialized K-9 unit. They served overseas." Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Relief, disbelief, and a renewed sense of purpose. She stood up, her hand resting on the kennel door. "Their story isn't over," she said quietly. "Not yet." As the night deepened, Sarah made a silent promise to Rex and Molly. She didn't know what the future held, but she would do everything in her power to ensure they were remembered, celebrated, and given the dignity they deserved. The morning sunlight filtered through the shelter's small windows, casting long shadows on the floor. Dr. Sarah Harper sat at her desk, staring at the handwritten notes she had scribbled the night before. The revelation about Rex and Molly's past lingered in her mind, a puzzle waiting to be solved. How had two military dogs ended up as strays, forgotten for 8 years? Jess entered the room carrying a cup of coffee. "I called the military base again," she said, placing the cup on Sarah's desk. "They're sending someone over to help us dig into their records." Sarah nodded, her eyes still fixed on the notes. "We need to know what happened to them. They deserve answers, and so do we." Jess hesitated. "Do you think they were abandoned? Maybe left behind after they served?" Sarah shook her head. "It doesn't make sense. Military dogs are treated like heroes. Something must have gone terribly wrong." Hours later, a tall man in uniform arrived at the shelter. He introduced himself as Sergeant Mitchell, a liaison for the military's K-9 program. His stern face softened as Sarah and Jess led him to Rex and Molly's kennel. The dogs were lying close together just as they had been the night before. Mitchell crouched down, his eyes narrowing as he examined them. "I can't believe it," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "These two, they were legends in the field." Sarah and Jess exchanged surprised glances. "Legends?" Sarah asked. Mitchell nodded. "Rex and Molly were part of a specialized K-9 unit. They weren't just any dogs, they worked together on some of the most dangerous missions overseas. They saved countless lives." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "How did they end up here?" she asked. "Why were they abandoned?" Mitchell sighed, running a hand over his face. "That's the part we need to figure out. Their records show they were separated from their handlers during a chaotic extraction mission 8 years ago. They were presumed lost, missing in action." Jess gasped. "You mean all this time the military thought they were dead?" "Exactly," Mitchell replied. "We had no idea they'd survived, let alone made it back stateside. It's a miracle they're alive." The next step was to retrieve detailed records from the military archives. Sarah and Jess helped Mitchell scan through old reports, piecing together the dog's history. The story that unfolded was both incredible and heartbreaking. Rex and Molly had been deployed to a conflict zone overseas, where they worked as a team in bomb detection and search and rescue operations. They had been inseparable, their bond allowing them to communicate and work together with unmatched precision. But during their final mission, chaos erupted. Their unit was ambushed, and in the confusion, Rex and Molly became separated from their handlers. For weeks, the military searched for them, but there was no trace. Eventually, they were listed as missing in action and presumed dead. Unknown to anyone, Rex and Molly had survived, finding their way back to safety on their own. How they managed such a feat remained a mystery. As the pieces came together, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. These dogs had been through hell, and yet they'd spent nearly a decade in a shelter, overlooked and forgotten. "We failed them," she said quietly, her voice trembling. Mitchell placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You didn't fail them, Dr. Harper. You gave them a place to live when no one else did. Now, we can give them the ending they deserve." Sarah glanced back at Rex and Molly. They were awake now, their eyes following her every movement. It was as if they understood what was happening, as if they knew their past was finally catching up to them. "What happens next?" Jess asked. Mitchell straightened, his expression resolute. "I'll make the arrangements to have them transferred to a specialized retirement facility for military working dogs. They'll get the care and respect they deserve for the rest of their lives." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her. But even as hope began to take root, she couldn't ignore the lingering question. "Do you think they remember their handlers?" she asked. Mitchell hesitated. "It's possible," he said. "The bond between a handler and their canine partner is unbreakable. If they do remember, it'll be like no time has passed." That night, as the shelter quieted, Sarah returned to Rex and Molly's kennel. She knelt down beside them, her hand reaching through the bars to stroke their fur. "You've been through so much," she whispered. "But it's not over yet. We'll make sure you're safe." Rex shifted slightly, his gaze meeting hers. His eyes, deep and wise, seemed to hold a silent gratitude. Molly, ever the gentle companion, rested her head on Rex's chest, her tail wagging faintly. Together they seemed to embody resilience and hope, a testament to the strength of their bond. As Sarah watched them, she made a silent promise, no matter what it took, she would ensure that Rex and Molly's story had the happy ending they so deeply deserved. Chapter 3. The Call for Help. The air in the shelter was thick with anticipation as the day unfolded. Dr. Sarah Harper felt a strange mix of relief and urgency after discovering Rex and Molly's extraordinary past. The revelation of their service in the military gave her hope, but it also raised countless questions. She couldn't help but wonder if their handlers were still alive, or if anyone in the military even remembered these two unsung heroes. Sergeant Mitchell, who had spent the previous day piecing together their fragmented story, returned to the shelter that morning. He carried a thick folder of documents and looked determined. "We've got some digging to do," he said, placing the folder on Sarah's desk. "I've pulled everything we could find on Rex and Molly's unit." Sarah and Jess gathered around as Mitchell spread out the papers. There were photographs, mission reports, and even training logs. In one of the photos, Rex and Molly stood proudly beside their handlers, their youthful energy evident in their bright eyes and strong postures. "They were part of a specialized canine bomb detection unit," Mitchell explained. "Their bond wasn't just emotional, it was tactical. These two worked together like clockwork, covering each other's weaknesses and amplifying each other's strengths." Sarah traced her finger over the photo. "And yet, they ended up here," she said softly. "How does something like this happen?" Mitchell sighed. "War is chaos. Their last mission was during a particularly dangerous extraction. The details are sketchy, but the unit was ambushed, and Rex and Molly were separated from their handlers. The team had to evacuate quickly, and the dogs were presumed lost." Jess frowned. "So they were just left behind?" "It wasn't intentional," Mitchell said, his tone defensive but understanding. "The situation was life or death, but yes, they were left behind. And somehow, they survived." The shelter became a flurry of activity as Mitchell worked with Sarah and Jess to contact the right departments within the military. Every phone call felt like another step toward justice for Rex and Molly. But not everyone was eager to help. During one particularly frustrating call, Sarah slammed the receiver down, her face flushed with anger. "They said the records are classified," she told Mitchell. "How can that be? These dogs deserve answers." Mitchell leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Classified doesn't always mean impossible," he said. "I'll make a few calls of my own, but it might take time." "Time is something they don't have much of," Sarah said, glancing toward the kennel where Rex and Molly rested. Their age and health issues loomed over every decision. Hours later, a breakthrough came. One of Mitchell's contacts had managed to find additional details about Rex and Molly's handlers. The dogs had been assigned to Sergeant Chris Reynolds and Specialist Amy Carter, both of whom had served multiple tours overseas. The military had presumed both handlers had moved on after the dogs were declared missing. Mitchell placed a call to the nearest military base, and after some persuasion, they agreed to notify Reynolds and Carter. "If they're still reachable, they'll know by the end of the day," Mitchell told Sarah. "Do you think they'll come?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mitchell's gaze softened. "If they're anything like most handlers I know, they'll drop everything to see their partners again." By evening, the shelter phone rang. Sarah answered it quickly, her heart pounding. On the other end was a deep, steady voice. "This is Sergeant Chris Reynolds. I was told you found Rex and Molly." Sarah exhaled shakily, relief washing over her. "Yes, Sergeant, they're here at the county animal shelter. They've been with us for 8 years. There was a pause, and Sarah could hear the emotion in his voice when he spoke again. 8 years, he repeated. "I thought they were gone. I thought I'd lost them." "You haven't," Sarah said firmly. "They're alive, and they're waiting for you." Reynolds promised to come the next day, and Sarah hung up with a renewed sense of hope. "He's coming," she told Jess, unable to hide the smile spreading across her face. "Rex and Molly are finally going home." That night, Sarah visited their kennel one last time before leaving. Rex and Molly were lying side by side, their breathing slow and steady. Sarah knelt down, reaching through the bars to stroke Rex's fur. "Your wait is over," she whispered. "Tomorrow you'll see him again." Rex opened his eyes, his gaze calm and steady. Molly shifted slightly, her tail wagging faintly. Together they seemed to understand that something extraordinary was about to happen. Sarah left the shelter feeling lighter than she had in weeks. For the first time in years, Rex and Molly's story was no longer one of abandonment and loss. It was becoming one of reunion and redemption. The morning air was crisp as sunlight streamed through the shelter windows, casting golden rays onto the floor. Dr. Sarah Harper stood by the front desk, her nerves on edge. Today was the day Rex and Molly would reunite with their former handler, Sergeant Chris Reynolds. Despite the hope that had carried her through the past few days, Sarah couldn't shake the gnawing anxiety. How would Rex and Molly react? Would they remember him after all these years? Jess arrived early, bustling with excitement. "I still can't believe this is happening," she said, her voice brimming with energy. "It feels like a movie." Sarah nodded, managing a small smile. "It does," she admitted. "But it's real, and that's what makes it even more incredible." Just after 10 a.m., a black SUV pulled into the shelter's parking lot. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, his presence commanding yet gentle. Sergeant Chris Reynolds, now in his late 40s, had the rugged look of someone who had faced many challenges yet remained resilient. His gaze scanned the shelter, searching for the dogs who had once been his partners in the field. Sarah stepped outside to greet him. "Sergeant Reynolds?" she asked, extending her hand. He shook it firmly. "Dr. Harper," he replied, his voice steady. "Thank you for taking care of them. I can't tell you what this means to me." "They've been waiting a long time," Sarah said softly. "Come with me." Sarah led Reynolds down the familiar hallway toward Rex and Molly's kennel. The dogs were lying close together as usual, their eyes half closed in rest. But as they approached, Rex's ears perked up. His nose twitched and he slowly lifted his head. Molly stirred beside him, her tail giving a faint wag. Reynolds knelt in front of the kennel, his breath catching in his throat. "Rex." "Molly," he said, his voice trembling. Rex's gaze locked onto Reynolds and something seemed to click. The old German Shepherd mix struggled to his feet, his arthritic joints creaking as he moved. Molly followed suit, her golden fur catching the light as she wagged her tail more enthusiastically. Then it happened. Rex let out a low, rumbling bark of recognition and hobbled toward the kennel door. Molly whined softly, pressing her nose against the bars. Their movements, though slowed by age, were filled with a sense of urgency and joy. "They remember," Jess whispered, her hand covering her mouth. Sarah nodded, her eyes misty. "Of course they do." Reynolds unlocked the kennel door and stepped inside. Rex immediately leaned against him, his large frame trembling with excitement. Molly circled him, her tail wagging furiously. Reynolds wrapped his arms around them both, burying his face in Rex's fur. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "I thought you were gone." The reunion was quiet yet profoundly emotional. Tears streamed down Reynolds' face as he held the dogs close, his hands trembling. Rex licked his face, his tail wagging with renewed energy, while Molly pressed her head against his chest, letting out soft whimpers of joy. For several minutes, no one spoke. Jess wiped away tears, and even Sarah found herself overcome with emotion. The bond between Reynolds and the dogs was undeniable, a connection that time and distance had failed to break. As the initial excitement settled, Reynolds sat on the floor of the kennel, letting Rex and Molly lie beside him. He stroked their fur, his voice low and soothing. "You've been through so much," he said, "but you're safe now. I promise." Sarah stepped closer. "They've been here for 8 years," she said. "I can't imagine how they managed to survive all that time before they ended up at the shelter." Reynolds nodded. "They've always been fighters," he said, his voice filled with pride. "I trained them myself. They were the best partners anyone could ask for." "What happens now?" Jess asked, breaking the silence. Reynolds looked up, his expression resolute. "I'm taking them home," he said. "They've earned it." Later that day, as the paperwork was finalized, Reynolds shared stories about Rex and Molly's time in the military. He described their bravery, their intelligence, and the bond they had shared with their unit. "They saved lives," he said. "Not just mine, but countless others. They deserve to live out their days in peace." When it was time to leave, Rex and Molly walked beside Reynolds, their movements slow but purposeful. The shelter staff gathered to watch, their faces filled with admiration and gratitude. As the trio stepped outside, Rex paused, turning back to look at Sarah and Jess. His deep brown eyes seemed to hold a silent thank you. Sarah waved, her heart full. "Take care of them," she called out. Reynolds nodded. "I will," he said. "Thank you. For everything." As the SUV pulled away, Sarah and Jess stood in silence, watching until it disappeared down the road. "This is why we do what we do," Sarah said finally, her voice soft but firm. Jess smiled through her tears. "It's a good day," she said. "It is," Sarah agreed. "It really is." The ride to Sergeant Chris Reynolds's home was quiet, filled only with the occasional sound of Rex and Molly shifting in the back seat of the SUV. Reynolds glanced at them through the rearview mirror, his heart swelling with a mix of relief and gratitude. After 8 long years, they were finally back where they belonged, with someone who loved and understood them. His home was a modest house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by open fields and a line of tall, swaying trees. It was peaceful, exactly the kind of place where Rex and Molly could spend their remaining years in comfort. Reynolds pulled into the driveway and stepped out, opening the back door for the dogs. Rex was the first to emerge, his movements slow but steady. Molly followed, wagging her tail as she took in her new surroundings. "Welcome home," Reynolds said, crouching down to stroke their fur. Inside, the house had already been prepared for their arrival. In the corner of the living room, 2 large cushioned beds sat waiting, along with bowls filled with fresh water and food. Reynolds led them inside, watching as they sniffed around, exploring the space with cautious curiosity. "You're safe now," he said softly. "This is your home." Rex settled onto one of the beds, letting out a contented sigh as he stretched out his aching joints. Molly lay beside him, her tail wagging faintly as she rested her head on her paws. Reynolds sat on the floor next to them, his hand resting on Rex's back. For a moment, everything felt right. The days that followed were filled with quiet moments of healing and reconnection. Reynolds took Rex and Molly on short walks through the fields, their pace slow but steady. He spent hours brushing their fur, feeding them treats and simply sitting with them under the shade of the trees. Each day, their energy seemed to return, if only a little, and their eyes shone brighter with every passing moment. One afternoon, as they lounged together by the pond in the backyard, Reynolds received a call from Dr. Sarah Harper. "I just wanted to check in," she said. "How are they doing?" "They're adjusting," Reynolds replied, smiling as he watched Rex and Molly doze in the sunlight. "It's like they're finally letting themselves relax." "Thank you, Dr. Harper. I owe you more than I can ever repay." "You don't owe me anything," Sarah said gently. "You're the one who gave them a home. I'm just glad they're where they belong." Weeks turned into months, and Rex and Molly continued to thrive. Reynolds made it a point to share their story with friends and neighbors, many of whom were moved by the tale of their resilience and loyalty. The community rallied around them, offering support and donations to help with their care. One day, Reynolds received an unexpected package in the mail. Inside was a framed photograph of Rex and Molly during their military days, along with a letter from specialist Amy Carter, their other handler. The letter detailed her memories of working with the dogs, describing their bravery and the bond they had shared. "They weren't just partners," she wrote. "They were family." Reynolds placed the photo on the mantel above the fireplace, a tribute to the dogs who had given so much. As he looked at it, he felt a renewed sense of gratitude. Rex and Molly had not only survived, they had taught him the true meaning of loyalty and love. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Reynolds sat on the porch, watching Rex and Molly rest together at his feet. The warm breeze carried the scent of grass and wildflowers, and the soft chirping of crickets filled the air. He reached down, gently scratching behind Rex's ears. "You've earned this," he said quietly. "Both of you." Molly stirred, lifting her head to look at him. Her tail wagged slowly, and she nudged his hand with her nose. Reynolds chuckled, leaning down to kiss the top of her head. Rex shifted closer, his body pressing against Reynolds' leg. In that moment, surrounded by the serenity of the evening, Reynolds felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time in years, the weight of loss had lifted, replaced by the joy of reunion and the promise of a future filled with love and care.